The dog who refused to sleep because he knew the intruder was coming. Most nights Echo would sleep at the foot of Eli's bed, silent, still, watching shadows that didn't move. But that night, he wouldn't close his eyes. He paced. He growled at the door, and when the wind howled, his ears twitched, not in fear, but memory. At 2:43 a.m., the glass shattered. A man in black slipped through the laundry room. Echo launched. He didn't hesitate. He didn't bark. He didn't wait for a command that would never come. And while Rachel screamed for Eli and blood hit the kitchen floor, the truth began to unravel. Not just about the man with the knife, but about Echo himself, where he came from, and what he was trained to do. The afternoon sky over Stonehaven Park looked as if someone had dragged a charcoal stick across the clouds, smudging edges into bruised purples and tired grays. Rain did not fall in sheets so much as in restless pulses, sharp, stinging drops that peppered the playground mulch and hissed on the metal slide. Most parents had already gathered their children and fled to the shelter of minivans and porch lights. But 6-year-old Eli Patterson lingered beneath the dripping maple at the edge of the play structures, his raincoat hood too large for his small shoulders, his eyes fixed on a single point beneath the faded yellow slide. There, half hidden in the dimming light, crouched a German shepherd, a mottled silhouette stitched together by tremors. Mud clung to its paws, scar tissue spider-webbed across its flank. One ear stood erect, as if still trying to obey some forgotten command, while the other drooped in defeat. The dog's rib cage rose and fell rapidly, each breath shallow, as though pain had claimed the deeper ones for itself. But what held Eli was not the wounds. It was the eyes, liquid amber ringed with storm-dark worry, wide and silent, staring at nothing and everything all at once. A gust of wind rattled the chain-link swing set, and the dog flinched. Its body pressed lower to the ground as if the earth itself might swallow it whole. Eli's chest ached. Something inside him, something that did not yet know the word empathy but understood it perfectly, tightened until he could hardly breathe. Eli! His mother's voice, Rachel, cut across the playground like the first crack of thunder. She jogged toward him, rain glazing her cheeks. Her eyes flicked from her son to the dark shape under the slide and widened with alarm. "Stay back from that dog," she urged, taking his wrist. "It could be sick." She left the other possibilities, rabid, feral, violent, hanging in the air where Eli could taste their bitterness. Behind her, 2 other adults huddled beneath an oversized umbrella. A man in a business overcoat shook his head. "Animal control should have come already," he grumbled. "Stray like that's a lawsuit waiting to happen." "Looks half crazy," the woman beside him added, eyes narrowing. "You can see it's dangerous just by the scars." Eli glanced at the dog again. Dangerous? The animal was shaking so hard its claws scraped faint lines in the wet sand. It looked less like a beast ready to attack, and more like someone who had already lost the war. "Mom, he's scared," Eli whispered. Rainwater trailed down his nose. He let it drip, unwilling to wipe away the cold reminder that this moment was real. "We can't leave him." Rachel crouched, bringing her face level with her son's. "Sweetheart, I know you feel bad for him." Her voice softened. "But we don't know anything about that dog. He could bite." A crack of distant thunder rolled over them. The shepherd's head jerked. Its eyes, those pleading, drowning eyes, found Eli's through the gloom. One slow blink, a tremor. Then, astonishingly, the faintest thump of a tail on damp sand. so tentative it could have been a twitch. Eli's heart surged. "You saw that?" he breathed. "He's saying hello." Rachel followed his gaze, brows knitting. She wanted to see only risk a potential ER visit, a ruined childhood memory, but what she glimpsed instead was the raw loneliness in that animal's posture, the kind she herself had felt in the oncology waiting room last winter while her own father fought for breath. She shivered. "We have to go," she decided, half to herself. "But now, Eli." Her tone held finality, the adult's shield against the world's disorder. She guided him toward the parking lot. Eli obeyed, but each step away felt heavier, as if invisible threads stretched from his ribs to the dog's shaking frame, pulling, pleading not to sever. Rain intensified, drumming on playground equipment like frantic Morse code. Eli risked one last glance over his shoulder. The dog's gaze tracked him, not with accusation, but with the quiet resignation of someone used to watching help retreat. A fresh pang shot through the boy's chest. "I'll come back," he promised silently, clenching his small fists inside soggy mittens. "I don't know how, but I will." The minivan smelled of damp cloth and Rachel's lavender hand sanitizer. Eli sat buckled in the back, shoes dripping onto the rubber mat. His mother started the engine. Wipers swept arcs across the windshield, revealing the blurred outline of the playground. For a heartbeat, the dog's silhouette remained, a soldier left behind on a battlefield of plastic slides and abandoned juice boxes. Rachel breathed out, shoulders tense. "It's not our problem," she murmured, more to calm herself than to convince Eli. But guilt seeped in. She glanced at her rear-view mirror, met her son's tear-bright eyes, and felt the guilt harden into something heavier. "Maybe animal control will pick him up tonight," she offered. The words rang hollow in the confined space. Eli pressed his forehead to the cool glass. In the distance, the German shepherd's figure blurred with the falling rain until it was impossible to tell dog from shadow. Night draped Stonehaven in sodden darkness. Rain slowed to a persistent mist, haloing the lonely streetlights. Beneath the yellow slide, the dog lay curled, Rachel's forgotten hoodie still lying where Eli had dropped it as they left its fabric now soaked, yet offering a whisper of warmth. The shepherd nosed the small garment, inhaling the child's scent of peanut butter sandwiches and sidewalk chalk. A soft whine escaped him, half question, half memory. Pain pulsed in his shoulder where an old stitch had torn open during the evening's tremors. He licked at the wound, but stopped, exhausted. Above, the playground lights flickered. One sputtered out with a sigh, plunging the park into deeper gloom. Wind rattled the chains on the swings, a haunted lullaby. The dog lifted his muzzle and, for the first time in weeks, let out a low, keening howl. It rolled across empty park benches and shuttered concession stands, rising, breaking, then scattering like fragile glass against the clouds. No handlers came, no sirens answered, only the echo returned, thin, distant, reminding him of everything he had lost. Far away, in a small bedroom filled with dinosaur stickers, Eli startled awake. He couldn't name what he'd heard, only that it felt like sadness wearing a wolf's coat. He slipped from bed, padding to the window. Rain drummed softly on the pane. Down the hallway, Rachel sat at the dining table, laptop open yet forgotten, fingers worrying the rim of a chipped mug. She looked up as Eli approached, eyes asking a question she was afraid to voice. "I heard him," Eli whispered. "He's still out there." Rachel opened her mouth to reassure, but truth crowded out comfort. Instead, she pulled her son onto her lap and wrapped him in the afghan her mother had crocheted. Together they listened to the rain, both pretending that was all they heard. Outside, the howl faded, but its echo lingered, bouncing between mother and child, threading through dreams, refusing to be silenced. "Tomorrow," Eli vowed as his eyelids grew heavy. "I'll go back tomorrow." And somewhere beneath the slide, a wounded dog breathed in the scent of a child's hoodie and waited for dawn. The next morning broke gently. No thunder, no heavy clouds, just a soft, hesitant light creeping across the rooftops of Stonehaven, as if the sky itself had spent the night in quiet mourning. The park was empty again, save for the rustle of breeze through soaked leaves and the soft creak of a swing shifting on its chain. Eli stood by the front door in mismatched socks, clutching a napkin-wrapped sandwich in one hand and his school hoodie in the other. He looked up at his mother, eyes steady. "I need to check something," he said, voice softer than usual. Rachel narrowed her eyes. "The dog again?" Eli didn't answer. He didn't have to. Rachel exhaled, brushing a damp curl behind his ear. 5 minutes. No closer than the sidewalk. And you come right back, Eli. I mean it." He nodded solemnly, but already his heart was pulling him toward the place under the yellow slide. The ground squished under his shoes as he crossed the park, every step quiet, like he was afraid to wake something sacred. The playground looked almost normal in the early light, bright plastic, birdsong in the trees, but to Eli, it felt like entering a dream he wasn't supposed to remember. And then he saw him. The dog hadn't moved far from where they'd left him. His body was curled tight, one paw bent awkwardly beneath his chest. Mud stained his legs, and the tear on his shoulder looked raw. But the eyes, those amber eyes, lifted when Eli approached, blinking slow and uncertain. Eli crouched at a respectful distance, placing the sandwich down on the grass and unwrapping it with care. "I brought peanut butter," he said softly. "It's all I could sneak without Mom noticing." The dog sniffed the air but didn't move. His ribs shivered, visible even beneath the thick fur. Eli waited. "You look like you've been waiting for something," he whispered, inching forward on his knees. "Or someone." He set the sandwich down and gently pushed it closer. Still, the dog didn't eat. He just stared, half hope, half doubt. "I think I should call you something," Eli said. "You don't look like a danger." His voice dropped, imitating the adults from the day before. "Unpredictable," they said. "Not safe." He frowned. "That's not true." He sat back on his heels, hoodie crumpled in his lap. "I think I'll call you Echo," he decided. "Because it feels like you're waiting to hear someone call you back." The name hung between them like a truce. Echo's ears twitched, and then cautiously, with the stiffness of pain and old habits, he dragged himself forward. 1 step, then 2, until his nose hovered just above the sandwich. Eli didn't move. He held his breath as the dog nudged the bread, then finally took a bite. His jaw worked slow, unsure. Tears stung the corners of Eli's eyes, but he didn't blink them away. "You're not a ghost," he murmured. "You're just lost." He stood slowly, heart pounding, and removed the hoodie from his arms. "Here," he said, laying it down beside Echo like a blanket in a hospital bed. "It smells like me. I figured that might help." He paused, cheeks flushing. "I know that sounds silly." Echo didn't respond, but when Eli turned to go, the dog's nose found the sleeve and lingered there. Rachel watched from across the street, arms crossed tightly over her chest. She couldn't hear what was being said, but she could see her son, small, fragile, fearless, kneeling beside a dog she'd been told to fear. Her instincts screamed to intervene. But something stopped her. Something about the stillness, the reverence. She hadn't seen her son that gentle since her father's funeral when he'd tried to place a Lego figure in the urn before the cremation. She stayed still, letting the moment shape itself. That night, the house was quiet. Eli had barely touched his dinner, but he hadn't argued when Rachel said no more visits for now. "You did a kind thing today," she said at bedtime, tucking the covers around his legs. "Will he be okay?" Eli asked. Rachel hesitated. "I don't know." He nodded, as if he expected that answer. "Good night, sweetheart," she whispered, brushing his curls from his forehead. But Eli didn't sleep right away. He lay awake, staring at the ceiling, listening to the wind and wondering if Echo had eaten the rest of the sandwich, wondering if Echo was cold, alone, forgotten again. Under the flickering park light, Echo lay curled atop the hoodie, its soft cotton holding the memory of small arms and peanut butter. His wound throbbed, but it wasn't the sharpest pain in him. The deepest ache came from elsewhere, a place that knew commands, loyalty, partnership, a place that once knew belonging. Somewhere deep in the marrow of his bones, Echo remembered a whistle, a voice, a promise. Now silence filled those places. He lifted his head and stared into the dark trees where no one was coming. Then, slowly, his chest rose, and he howled. It wasn't a cry of anger or threat. It was long, low, and broken, a sound carved from the hollows of loss. It spilled into the empty streets and across the rooftops, brushing past bedroom windows and through closed doors until it found Eli's dreams and stirred them gently awake. Eli sat up in bed, heart pounding, and somewhere in the dark, Echo lay listening, not for a command, but for a child's promise. Rachel hadn't expected it to go this far. At first she thought it was just a phase her son's tendency to latch onto lost things. A moth with a torn wing, a rusted coin in the gutter, an old shoebox he once called a treasure chest. But this was different. Eli wasn't just curious about the dog. He was committed. For the third afternoon in a row, she found him back at the park, knees dusty, fingers outstretched, whispering soft things to the German shepherd curled beneath the slide. The hoodie she'd let him wear 2 days ago was now permanently draped over the dog's body, and the food bowls she hadn't authorized were being refilled from scraps snuck from their own kitchen. And worst of all, the dog wasn't trying to leave anymore. It waited. For Eli, every single day. Rachel stood frozen on the sidewalk, her arms crossed, watching her son run his fingers through Echo's thick fur. There was something reverent about the gesture, not just affection, but understanding, the kind you don't teach kids with words. She exhaled, slow and uneasy. "This isn't going to end well," she muttered. By the end of the week, complaints started rolling in. It began with murmurs, an overheard comment at the grocery store. "Did you hear about the stray German shepherd near the playground? Big one, looks aggressive." Then came the online posts. "Unleashed attack dog roaming by the elementary school. My toddler was terrified. Someone needs to call animal control before it bites a kid." And finally, a knock on the door. Rachel opened it to find a grim-faced woman holding a clipboard and a bright orange notice. "Ma'am, we've received multiple reports of an unregistered stray in public spaces. If the animal is not claimed or removed by Thursday evening, animal control will intervene." Rachel's stomach sank. She didn't know what was worse, the threat itself, or the sound of Eli's bare feet thudding down the stairs behind her, overhearing everything. "Mom," he begged that night, eyes wet and wild. "You can't let them take him." Rachel rubbed her temples. "Sweetheart, he's not ours. We don't know where he came from or if he's safe around others. He is safe. He never growls. He let me feed him, pet him. He even licked my hand today. That doesn't mean he isn't dangerous to someone else." "But he's not," Eli cried. "He's not dangerous. He's hurt. That's different." Rachel flinched at the truth in that. There was something broken about the dog, but not in a way that frightened her anymore. It reminded her of Eli last summer, when he barely spoke for weeks after his grandfather passed. The same silent ache, the same refusal to be touched, until suddenly, one day, he leaned against her on the porch and whispered, "I miss the way he laughed." Echo had that look now, a silence that held memory. She didn't sleep much that night. Neither did Eli. By morning, she'd made a decision. They were going to the vet. The clinic was small, tucked between a laundromat and an old bakery on Hawthorne Street. A bell jingled overhead as Rachel held the door open and gestured for Eli to step in. He walked slowly, cradling Echo's makeshift leash like it was something sacred. Dr. Miriam Sloane was a soft-spoken woman with crow's feet and kindness in her voice. She didn't ask too many questions when Echo limped in, and she didn't flinch at the scars on his muzzle. "This one's been through something," she murmured, crouching low. "And not just street fights." Rachel shifted uncomfortably. "Can you check for a microchip? We think he might have had a home once." Miriam nodded, slipping on latex gloves and reaching for the scanner. She ran it along Echo's neck, down his shoulders. Beep! A ping echoed from the handheld device. Miriam's eyes flickered. "Found one." Eli leaned in, wide-eyed, but as she tapped the screen to pull up the ID, the device froze. A blinking red icon appeared. "Alert! Restricted record. Law enforcement access only." Rachel's brow furrowed. "What does that mean?" Dr. Sloane stared at the scanner, then looked up slowly. "It means this dog isn't just a stray." Eli blinked. "Is he in trouble?" Miriam's expression turned guarded. "I'm not sure. But this chip isn't standard. It's encrypted, possibly military or K-9 unit." Rachel's heart skipped. "Wait, like police?" The vet nodded. "And this alert? It probably triggered a flag in a system somewhere. If this dog's been missing, someone may already be looking for him." Echo stood perfectly still, not tense, not afraid, just waiting, as if he knew something had just changed. That night, back home, Rachel sat at the kitchen table with her laptop open, digging through articles. K-9 units, missing dogs, retired handlers. It all blurred together until one image stopped her cold. A news article, 2 years old. The headline read, "Officer with cancer mourns, missing K-9 partner, declared stolen." And the picture beneath it, a younger version of Echo, standing beside a uniformed officer in a wheelchair. Rachel didn't need confirmation. Her gut twisted. She turned to the living room, where Eli lay curled up on the floor next to the real dog, his head resting gently against Echo's chest, rising and falling with every breath. She'd never seen him sleep so peacefully, not since the funeral, not since the day the house had gone quiet. And now, beside this battered creature, her son was finally at rest. But Rachel knew peace was fragile, and somewhere out there, someone else now knew where Echo was. The countdown had started, and no one, not even the boy with the biggest heart in Stonehaven, could stop what was coming next. The morning after the scan, the air in Stonehaven felt heavier-like. Something was shifting, even if the sky remained cloudless. Rachel stood by the window, watching Echo doze in the backyard. Eli sat nearby on the porch steps, quietly humming, his fingers brushing against the dog's fur like a metronome for comfort. Echo's eyes flickered now and then, but he didn't move, not even when a squirrel darted across the fence. He was listening, not for danger, for something else, for someone else. By noon, Dr. Sloan called. Her voice was lower than usual, weighted with something she couldn't quite name. "Rachel?" I didn't want to say too much yesterday until I confirmed, but I dug deeper, cross-referenced chip data with police registries. I know who he is. Rachel's breath caught. "Echo?" The vet hesitated, then spoke slowly. "His name is Maverick, K9 Maverick. Badge number K92743. A decorated service dog from the Capital Metro Police Department's Narcotics and Search Division. He went missing 2 years ago after his handler, Sergeant Nathan Reyes, was hospitalized." Rachel blinked. "Hospitalized?" "Stage 4 lymphoma. Reyes took early retirement and disappeared from the public eye. There were murmurs the dog had been stolen, but no one was ever charged, and the trail went cold." There was a pause on the line. "But Rachel, Maverick wasn't just any K9. He was legendary. Multiple drug busts, explosives detection. He saved 3 officers during a warehouse fire. He wasn't just a partner. He was family." Rachel turned toward the backyard again. Eli was now curled beside Echo Maverick reading, aloud from a picture book, pointing at each illustration as if giving a report to a superior. She swallowed hard. "Does Reyes know Maverick's alive?" "I submitted the silent alert protocol. That would have notified the precinct, and probably Reyes directly, if he's still listed as next of kin." Another beat. "You should prepare, Rachel. Someone's going to come for him." That evening, Rachel sat Eli down on the couch, her hands folding and unfolding nervously in her lap. "Sweetheart," she said softly, "we need to talk about Echo." Eli looked up, already sensing the weight in her voice. "He has another name," she continued. "Maverick. He used to belong to someone. A police officer." "A good one." Eli didn't blink. "Like a partner?" Rachel nodded. "Yes, his name was Nathan Reyes. He was very sick, and when he went into the hospital, someone took Maverick. No one knew where he went, until now." Eli looked down, his fingers curling into his sleeves. "So, Echo was stolen?" "Yes." A long silence. "Does that mean we don't get to keep him?" Rachel didn't answer right away. Instead, she placed a hand on her son's shoulder and said what hurt most. "Sometimes, when you love something, you have to be willing to let it go, especially if it belongs somewhere else." Eli's eyes filled not with tears, but with something older, a silent grief, the kind that only children with too much empathy carry too soon. "But he came to me," he whispered. "He chose me." Rachel's heart cracked at the edges. "I know, baby. I know." That night, Eli didn't sleep in his bed. He curled up beside Echo in the hallway, arm draped over the dog's flank like a lifeline. Maverick didn't move all night except once, just before dawn, when he turned and pressed his nose softly against Eli's chest, as if memorizing the rhythm of the boy's breathing. The next morning, a black sedan pulled up in front of their house. Rachel was already waiting at the door. A tall man stepped out, moving slowly, a slight limp favoring his left side. He wore a dark coat despite the rising heat and carried nothing but a leather folder tucked beneath his arm. His face was gaunt, more from treatment than age, and his eyes bore the look of a man who'd already said goodbye too many times. Rachel stepped onto the porch. "Nathan Reyes?" she asked, though she already knew. He nodded once. "You called in a dog?" "No," she said quietly. "He found us." Nathan's mouth twitched into something between a smile and a wince. "That sounds like him." Rachel gestured inside. "He's with my son." Nathan hesitated at the threshold, his voice catching. "I don't know what he'll do when he sees me." They found Maverick in the living room, lying beside Eli, whose head rested on the dog's side. When the boy saw the stranger, he sat up but didn't move away. Maverick didn't stir at first, but then a shift in his ear, a subtle inhale, and then, slowly, his eyes opened. The moment stretched. Nathan stepped forward, slowly kneeling, lowering his voice to a whisper. "Mav?" The name broke the air like a forgotten song. Maverick rose, not abruptly, but with purpose, like a soldier waking from rest. He moved past Eli without pushing him aside and approached the man in silence. Then, as gently as breath, he pressed his head into Nathan's chest and stayed there. Nathan let out a sound half-breath, half-sob, and dropped the folder as his hand found the back of the dog's neck. "I looked everywhere," he choked. "I thought they took you for good." Eli stood quietly to the side, eyes wide. "His name really is Maverick?" Nathan nodded, still clutching the dog. "But I think he likes Echo, too." Eli smiled faintly. "Can he be both?" The silence that followed wasn't empty. It was sacred. The house was still. Outside, the wind traced its fingers through the maple trees, making them shiver in the late afternoon light. Inside, Rachel stood in the kitchen with the chipped landline pressed to her ear, staring at nothing, her thumb nervously grazing the edge of the countertop. Eli was out back with Echo No, Maverick laughing as the dog tried to follow him through a maze of overturned buckets and garden tools. But Rachel wasn't listening to that. Her world had narrowed to the sound of each dial tone, the ones she hadn't heard in years, resurrected now like ghosts. She was calling the Capital Metro Police Department. The same department that had once praised this dog with medals, the same department that had filed him MIA. Her fingers paused above the final digit, hesitating before pressing down. Ring once. Ring twice. Then a metallic click, followed by a robotic voice. "The number you are trying to reach has been disconnected or is no longer in service." Rachel blinked, pulled the phone away, checked the digits again. She hadn't misdialed. No surprise, she thought. After 2 years, how many phone lines would still be connected? She sat down, took a breath, and tried again. This time a number she'd found buried in a forum thread from an old article about police K9s. A long shot, no extension. Just a 10-digit relic. She hit call, 1 ring, 2, then click. And a low voice, gravel rough and soft at the edges. "If you're calling about Maverick, you found him." Rachel froze. That was it. No name, no call back. Just a voice on a line that had clearly been waiting, not hoping, not expecting, just waiting for something to return. She didn't leave a message. She didn't have to. 4 hours later, her phone lit up again. A new number, no name, just a Colorado area code. She stepped onto the porch, away from Eli and the weight of everything happening too fast and too tender. She answered. "Rachel?" The voice was quiet, worn. "Yes," she replied. "You're Nathan Reyes. I got your call." Her throat tightened. "I didn't think the voicemail would still work." "I left it on," he said. "Didn't have the heart to shut it off. Didn't know what else to do." She nodded, even though he couldn't see it. "He's here. He's alive." "I'll come," he said, without pause. "I'll be on the road tonight." Rachel hesitated. "You don't have to rush." "I've already waited 2 years," Nathan said. "I'm not waiting another night." By morning, the gray sedan pulled up along the cracked curb just after sunrise. The car bore mountain dust in every crevice, and the tires wore the exhaustion of long hours and too few stops. The engine cut off, and for a long moment the man inside didn't move. Then the door opened. Nathan stepped out slowly, carefully, as if the air here might betray him somehow. He looked older than in the articles, in the archived service photos, his beard grown out, streaks of silver slicing through his hair, shoulders slightly hunched, not from age, but from the burden of things left unsaid. He carried nothing but a small, weathered manila envelope. Inside it was a single photo. It showed him in uniform, crouched beside Maverick Younger, stronger, the two of them framed by a sunset at a graduation ceremony. Maverick wore his vest proudly, badge glinting. Nathan's arm was wrapped around him like the dog was the only steady ground in the world. Rachel met him at the door. He handed her the photo without a word. She studied it carefully. And something inside her cracked, not from pain, but from the overwhelming reality that the creature sleeping in her son's room had once been part of another life, just as full, just as meaningful. "He remembers you," she said softly, "even before he knew you were coming." Nathan's eyes didn't leave the house. "I dreamed about him," he murmured. "Sometimes I'd wake up thinking I still heard his bark outside the cabin. Other times, I wondered if it was better not knowing." "And now?" she asked. His lips trembled faintly. "Now I know." Inside the house, Echo Maverick stirred from his place beside Eli. He stood, ears pricking, as if the shift in the wind had brought back something long buried. Then, with no hesitation, he padded toward the front hallway. Rachel stepped aside, and the door slowly opened. When Nathan Reyes stepped into the entryway, the house seemed to fall silent. Echo froze. Then, without a growl, without a bark, he walked forward, slow but certain. He paused at Nathan's boots, lifted his head, and placed it against the man's thigh. Just one heartbeat. That was all it took. Nathan's hand shook as he touched the fur between Maverick's ears. And then he knelt, burying his face into the neck of the dog who had once pulled him from fire, rubble, gunfire, and grief. "I'm sorry I lost you," he whispered. Echo said nothing, but his body pressed closer, as if to say, "You never did." The living room was quiet. Not the kind of silence that feels empty, but the kind that arrives when something sacred is happening. Something too soft for words, too full to interrupt. Outside, the wind carried birdsong across the porch, but inside, time had stopped. Nathan sat on the edge of the couch, his back hunched slightly. A thick cardigan loose around his shoulders like armor long outgrown. The man who'd once worn a badge, who'd trained among fire and fury, now looked like someone the world had forgotten to check in on. His hands rested on his knees, trembling faintly, not from nerves, but from the kind of tiredness that settled in the bones and never left. Across from him, Maverick stood still, ears tilted back, tail low but wagging in unsure rhythms. The air between them pulsed with a memory neither of them had the courage to speak aloud. Then, slowly, Maverick stepped forward. His paw steps were nearly soundless on the hardwood. He approached not with excitement, but with reverence, like a soldier returning to familiar soil after too many years of war. Nathan didn't move. His eyes glistened behind wire-rimmed glasses, but he didn't blink. When Maverick reached him, the dog paused, exhaled. Then, gently, almost like he was asking permission, he lowered his head and pressed it against Nathan's knees. A whimper broke from the dog's chest, muffled and soft. It wasn't the sound of pain. It was the sound of something long held in finally finding release. Nathan let out a breath that came from somewhere deep inside. He placed a frail hand on Maverick's neck, then his other on the side of his face. His fingers sank into the fur, now patchy in places, scarred in others. He leaned forward until his forehead touched the top of Maverick's head. "I looked for you," Nathan whispered. "God, I tried." Maverick lifted his paw and, with impossible gentleness, placed it on Nathan's lap. Rachel stood in the hallway, hand pressed to her mouth. Eli watched from the stairs, his little heart thudding so hard he swore it echoed in the walls. No one dared move. Nathan stroked the side of Maverick's face, his voice cracking open. "They said you were gone, that maybe you'd been taken, maybe worse. I was going through chemo. I had no fight left in me. I thought maybe it was better if you never saw me like that, but when I heard what they were using you for—" His voice broke. He took a moment. "I had to try." Maverick made no sound. He just kept leaning into Nathan's touch, his breathing steady now, as if he'd waited 2 years just to exhale. "You saved my life more than once," Nathan said, pulling something from his coat pocket. It was an old dog tag, the kind usually clipped to a tactical vest. The name engraved on it read, "K9 Maverick, CMPD 1216. Beneath that, find, protect, return." Nathan curled it in his palm and pressed it lightly to Maverick's chest. The dog didn't flinch. "You deserve more than what they did to you," Nathan whispered. "They thought they could strip away your purpose, but they never understood. You're not a tool." He looked up at Rachel, eyes pleading not for sympathy, but for help. "I can't take him back," Nathan said. "I live in a cabin up north, no fence. Neighbors miles away. My lungs, they're not what they used to be. I can't even drive at night anymore, but I couldn't leave him to rot in their hands. I couldn't let them turn him into something he's not." Rachel's heart clenched. "You came all this way," she said softly. "I had to see him again," Nathan replied. "I had to let him know he wasn't abandoned." Eli stepped down the stairs slowly. "So what happens now?" Nathan looked at the boy, and for a moment the air shifted again. It wasn't the gaze of an adult to a child. It was something quieter, something reverent. "You gave him a name," Nathan said. "Echo." Eli nodded, because he looked like he was waiting to hear someone call him back. Nathan let out a small, surprised breath. It wasn't quite a laugh, but it held something close. "I think," he said, turning to Maverick, "you heard him." Maverick moved then, just a little, and sat beside Eli, his body pressed to the boy's leg, tail curling gently around his paws. Nathan's throat worked hard to swallow. He looked down again at the photo Rachel had returned to him earlier, the one of him and Maverick in uniform years ago. In that moment it no longer felt like a goodbye. It felt like a passing of the torch. "Take care of him," Nathan said to Eli. "He'll take care of you." Eli didn't speak. He just nodded, his small hand resting on the scarred fur beside him. And Maverick, no. Echo leaned in closer, eyes half closed, finally at peace. Rachel stood in the doorway of Eli's room, arms folded tightly across her chest, not for warmth, but for control. It was late, nearly midnight, and the house had gone still except for the rhythmic ticking of the old clock in the hallway. She had done this often since Echo came into their lives, this quiet vigil. She told herself it was to make sure Eli was covered, that the nightlight was still on, that the window was locked. But it wasn't that. It was Echo. The dog lay curled like a sentry at the foot of Eli's bed, his body forming a quiet barrier between boy and world. Ears flicked at even the softest creak, one eye always half-lidded, never fully asleep. Rachel watched them, heart caught in the strange space between fear and wonder. Just a week ago, she'd nearly called animal control again. Echo Maverick, she reminded herself, had a file. A decorated one, sure, but a dark one, too. Missing for 2 years. No one knew what he'd gone through, what he'd been used for, what he'd done. Dogs didn't come out of that untouched. They didn't come out clean. But then there was this, Eli's slow, steady breathing, his small hand dangling off the bed's edge, inches from Echo's paw. And most incredible of all, the stillness. No tossing, no crying out, no waking up in tears like he used to. Since Daniel died, Eli hadn't slept a full night. Until now. Rachel's eyes softened despite herself. Her son looked older somehow, not in his face, but in his calmness, like he was finally able to rest, not just physically, but somewhere deeper, somewhere only a dog's presence could reach. She walked quietly back to the kitchen, poured herself a glass of water, and sat at the table without turning on the light. The silence of the house wrapped around her like a thin shawl. Safe, but cold. Her phone buzzed on the counter. A message from Mara. "Did you ever find out what happened with the dog?" Rachel stared at the screen, then typed, "He belonged to a cop, went missing after some kind of trauma. Long story." Pause. Then another message from Mara. "And you're keeping him?" Rachel didn't reply. She set the phone down and looked through the hallway, where the faint glow of Eli's nightlight spilled out like a line drawn in chalk. "You're not a dog person." Daniel's voice echoed in her mind, teasing, warm. It had been one of their many quiet debates. He wanted a German shepherd. She said they were too big, too much work, too much energy. "They're loyal," he'd said. "Smart. You'd trust one with your life." Rachel had rolled her eyes. But now, with everything that had happened, she wondered if he'd somehow known. If this Echo, Eli, the way their breaths fell in rhythm, was a thread he'd unknowingly left behind for them to follow. She couldn't explain it, but she'd seen something strange the night before. It was around 3 a.m. Eli had cried out, a nightmare, one of his worst. Rachel had bolted upright and rushed to the door, but before she could reach the room, it went silent. She peeked inside. Echo had risen, hadn't barked, hadn't growled, but had placed his front paws on the edge of the bed, nuzzling Eli's face gently. Eli had mumbled something, whimpered, and then quieted. Just like that. Rachel had watched as Echo curled up again, his body pressed closer this time, as if creating a wall between the boy and the dark. Was that training, instinct, or something else? She remembered what the vet had said. Maverick had been trained not just for detection, but for psychological support during trauma scenes. There were rumors of these dogs sensing elevated cortisol, detecting spikes in human emotion before they even surfaced. It sounded like science fiction. But she'd seen it. He knows when Eli's hurting, she thought. Sometimes even before Eli does. Still, the fear lingered. What if something triggered Echo? What if some memory from his missing years returned and he snapped? What if Eli was the one too close? She looked down at her trembling hands. What if I'm the one who fails him again? The soft pad of paws against hardwood startled her. Rachel turned. Echo stood at the edge of the hallway, head low, tail unmoving. His eyes, not aggressive, not even curious, but alert, watchful, noticing her. She froze. He took a step forward, paused, then another. When he reached her chair, he didn't make a sound, just sat. His gaze never left hers. Rachel blinked, realizing she was holding her breath. Echo tilted his head slightly, then lay down, not at her feet, but near enough that she could feel the weight of his presence. He rested his head on his paws and closed his eyes. Not fully, just enough to say, "I see you. I'm not a threat, but I'm here." Rachel exhaled, and for the first time in months her shoulders lowered. Maybe she didn't need to decide everything tonight. Maybe she just needed to keep watching, keep feeling, and maybe, just maybe, healing didn't look like decisions. It looked like this. A boy sleeping without nightmares, a dog waiting in silence, and a mother trying to believe that even the damaged could still protect what mattered. The box came wrapped in duct tape and dust, corners frayed from time and grief. Nathan had left it on the porch with a simple note taped to the lid. These belong to him. Maybe they still mean something. Rachel stood at the threshold, arms folded, unsure whether to bring it inside. But Eli had already dropped to his knees beside it, his fingers grazing the faded cardboard as if it held something sacred. When he lifted the lid, the scent of old leather and cedar wafted up, clean, careful, restrained. Not like something forgotten, but something preserved. Inside were layers of objects, each one neatly wrapped in memory. A worn harness marked Maverick, 2 laminated scent cards, a yellowed training log with initials scribbled in the margins, a braided rope toy long unraveled at the ends, and at the very bottom, a small metal whistle on a fraying cord. Eli reached for it instinctively. "Careful," Rachel warned, her voice tight, but not unkind. "I just want to see," he whispered, lifting it into the light. The whistle was slim, silver, the kind that didn't make any audible sound to human ears. "It looks normal. That's a code whistle," Nathan had explained earlier. "They're tuned for frequency-based cues, specific tones trained into the dog's memory." He'd hesitated before adding, "But it's been years. I don't even know if he'd still respond." But Eli couldn't resist. He brought the whistle to his lips and blew just once, softly. Echo, who had been napping under the table, shot to his feet like a switch had been flipped. His ears stood rigid, his eyes snapped open, and he turned fast toward Eli. He didn't bark, he didn't growl. He waited, like a soldier reporting for duty. Rachel stood frozen by the sink, dish towel clenched in her hand. She exchanged a glance with Eli, half awe, half caution. Did you see that?" Eli asked. Echo moved closer, his gaze locked on the boy, chest rising and falling with anticipation. When Eli took a step back, Echo followed. Not aggressively, deliberately, patiently. "What does that mean?" Eli asked. Rachel's voice was quiet. "It means he remembers." They cleared a space in the garage that evening, pushing aside boxes of holiday decorations and old bicycles. The concrete was cold and uneven, but Eli didn't care. He laid out the items from the box like artifacts, his own private museum of a dog's former life. He started with the laminated scent cards, small cotton squares sealed behind plastic. Nathan had told them they were used in narcotics detection training, each one infused with specific chemicals. Harmless now, inert from age, but to Echo, still meaningful. "Let's see if he still knows," Eli said with a spark in his eyes. He laid the cards down in a triangle and stepped back. "Find it," he said softly, without knowing if the command meant anything anymore. Echo sniffed once, twice, then circled. His tail stiffened, then wagged faintly. With precision that made Rachel catch her breath, Echo sat in front of the middle card, nose pointed down, posture rigid. "Whoa!" Eli looked up at his mom, a smile slowly stretching across his face. "Is that right?" he asked. Rachel, still stunned, could only nod. "Looks like it." Echo stayed frozen until Eli gave a second cue, this time clumsily, mimicking what he'd seen in YouTube videos. A flat palm downward. Echo stood calmly. "He wants to work," Eli murmured. "He misses it." The next hour unfolded in slow, stuttered miracles. Eli mimicked hand signals from videos, unsure, awkward, but Echo tried. He watched Eli, head tilted, eager to respond, even when the signal was wrong. Sometimes he'd pause and glance at Rachel as if to say, "Was that the cue? Was that close enough?" Rachel watched in silence, arms folded, leaning against the doorframe. Something softened in her, the quiet unraveling of an old fear. Eli blew the whistle again, trying shorter bursts. Echo's body responded like music to choreography. "Sit, down, stay, come." "Do you think," Eli asked breathlessly, "he could learn me too? Not just remember the old stuff?" Rachel smiled faintly. "I think he already is." Later, when the sky turned violet and the air chilled with the scent of pine and damp earth, Eli sat on the garage floor beside Echo, their backs against the cold wall. The whistle dangled from his wrist like a charm. "You know," Eli said softly, "you don't have to be a police dog anymore." Echo blinked, ears twitching. "You can just be Echo. You don't have to prove anything." The dog leaned his weight against Eli's side. Not heavily, just enough to say, "I hear you." Rachel watched from the kitchen window, one hand resting on the windowsill. Maybe this wasn't about rebuilding Maverick. Maybe it was about creating Echo. At first, Rachel thought it was just a phase. Maybe Echo was overstimulated by the noise of suburbia. Mail trucks, garbage bins clanking, bicycles zipping past. Any dog might get spooked. But the patterns didn't match panic. They felt intentional. It began on a Monday. They were walking home from school, Eli's backpack bouncing on his shoulders, Echo trotting beside him in perfect sync. Then suddenly, Echo stopped, muscles taut, ears perked, nose flaring. The dog turned sharply and stared at a cluster of mailboxes up ahead. Then he barked, low and sharp, a command, not fear. His stance was rigid, blocking Eli instinctively with his body. Rachel watched from the driveway, her arms crossed, sensing something twist low in her chest. "Echo?" Eli asked, confused. "It's just mailboxes, buddy." But Echo wouldn't move. He circled the base once, then again, then sat, eyes fixed on the metal doors like they held something alive. A growl rose in his throat, barely audible, but constant. Rachel called out, "Eli, get inside!" Eli hesitated but obeyed, Echo falling in behind him, still glancing over his shoulder until the door shut. That night, Rachel stared at the ceiling fan in her room, turning slowly in the dark. She didn't want to admit it, not even to herself. But something about that moment chilled her in a way she hadn't felt since before. Since the hospital nights. Since the days she thought Eli might never wake up normal again. Echo had slept at the foot of Eli's bed, his ears twitching even in dreams. But now he wasn't sleeping at all. Every creak in the hallway made his head lift. Every leaf outside had him by the window, motionless. 2 days later, they were walking past a black van parked down the block, engine cold, windows tinted. Echo stopped so abruptly the leash jerked from Eli's hand. He began pacing in circles, nose low, body weaving back and forth in front of the van's rear bumper. Rachel rushed over, grabbing the leash. "What are you doing?" Echo stood stiff, tail low, gaze locked on the van. Then he did something that made Rachel's blood run cold. He turned, stepped in front of Eli, and placed his body between the boy and the vehicle like a wall. He didn't growl. He didn't bark. He stood, protective, immovable. Eli looked up at his mother, eyes wide. "Mom, what's wrong with him?" Rachel tightened her grip on the leash. "I don't know," she said quietly, "but we're not staying here." That night, she called Nathan. He didn't answer right away. When he finally picked up, his voice was faint, like it traveled through gravel. "Something's happening with Echo," Rachel said. "Or Maverick. Whatever you call him." Nathan didn't speak. She continued rapid fire. "He's barking at mailboxes, circling random vans, standing in front of strangers like they're threats. I don't know if this is residual trauma or if he's picking up something else." Nathan sighed. "He's alerting." "What?" "That's alert behavior. Classic scent trigger or presence response." "You said vans?" "Yeah." "Were they running?" "No. Still, cargo space. Heat signature lingers. Could have been someone hiding in there recently. Could have smelled contraband or fear." Rachel went silent. "Rachel," Nathan continued gently. "He was trained to detect what people hide, not just drugs, weapons, nerves, sometimes even lies. Lies. You'd be surprised how dogs interpret intention. You lie to someone's face, he knows. That tension, the sweat, the heartbeat, he reads all of it." Rachel's voice cracked. "But we're just walking through a neighborhood. It's supposed to be normal." Nathan let the silence stretch, then said, "It's not normal for him. It never will be. But that doesn't mean he's wrong." Rachel turned to look through the window. Echo lay by Eli's door, head on his paws, but his eyes, those deep, haunted eyes, were wide open, watching, always watching. "Is this going to get worse?" she asked. "It depends what he's sensing. I don't want Eli in danger." "Then listen to the dog," Nathan said simply. That night, It rained soft, slow drizzle against the shingles. Eli was already asleep, curled into a quiet tangle of blankets. Rachel stood in the hallway, watching as Echo once again rose from his spot and walked to the window. He stared out at the street, unmoving. A minute passed, then two. Then, with no sound, his ears flattened. Rachel followed his gaze. Outside, just beyond the glow of the streetlight, a man stood motionless by the sidewalk. Hood pulled low, hands in pockets. He wasn't moving, wasn't walking, just standing facing the house. Rachel's breath hitched. She reached for her phone. By the time the cops arrived, the man was gone. No footprints, no sign. Nothing but the faint shape of Echo, still pressed against the window, the growl in his throat rising like thunder held at bay. The morning smelled like cold metal and antiseptic. Rachel sat stiffly in the corner of the vet's examination room, arms crossed, eyes flicking between Maverick, Echo, and Nathan, who stood by the door like a ghost, halfway between timelines. He hadn't said much since he arrived, except for a quiet greeting and a pat on the dog's head. His flannel jacket clung to his thin frame, soaked slightly at the hem from the drizzle outside. Eli perched on the stool beside the steel table, rubbing Maverick's ear in slow, absent circles. The dog sat obediently, calm but alert, his gaze never fully relaxing. The vet, Dr. Levesque, adjusted her glasses and clicked her tongue as she moved the scanner down Maverick's side. "Still picking up the original chip," she murmured. "Registered to the precinct, matches the public record. That's all we found last time." Nathan nodded. "I know, but something doesn't sit right." Rachel tilted her head. "What do you mean?" He hesitated. "Dogs like him, high clearance, specialized work. Sometimes things get added off books, especially if they're seconded to federal ops." Dr. Levesque arched a brow but said nothing. She kept scanning shoulders, back, chest, underbelly, then paused. "Wait." She adjusted the angle, then scanned again. A faint beep echoed through the room, softer than the first. "That's strange." Nathan moved closer. "What is it?" The vet frowned. "There's a second chip, buried deeper. It's not connected to any veterinary database, no pet registry, not even law enforcement." She stepped away and looked directly at Nathan. "You ever seen a passive RFID tag that doesn't match national law enforcement format?" Nathan didn't answer immediately. Rachel's voice cut through the tension. "What does that mean?" Dr. Levesque stepped over to her desk and pulled up her system. "Let me check the frequency signature. It'll take a minute." Eli's hand stilled on Maverick's fur. The boy's voice was a whisper. "Did someone else put that in him?" Nathan's jaw flexed. He stared at the floor for a long beat before speaking. "There were rumors, black badge teams, units trained for things not even local departments are told about. Maverick, he was transferred twice. Once, temporarily, for canine narcotics. But after that, his file just stopped updating." Rachel stood, suddenly needing to move, to breathe. "Are you saying someone implanted a hidden tracker in him and didn't tell you?" "I'm saying," Nathan said quietly, "I stopped being told things a long time ago." The vet returned, looking grim. "Whatever this is, it's not broadcasting openly. But it's designed to ping in proximity to a matching receiver. That means someone with the right scanner could walk by Maverick and know exactly who he is and where." A cold wave washed through the room. Rachel found herself backing away from the table. So someone could have been near him, near Eli, watching. Nathan stepped forward. "Can you remove it?" The vet hesitated. Yes, but it's not without risk. It's lodged near muscle tissue in his neck. I'd prefer to schedule a minor procedure and run a pre-op screen. No, Nathan said firmly. Do it now. Nathan, Rachel interjected, I don't want him walking out that door broadcasting a signal. His voice was calm, but something raw flickered under the surface. If they're already watching, we're behind. The vet nodded. Give me 20 minutes to prep. I'll need to sedate him. As she stepped out, silence reclaimed the room. Maverick, ever calm, licked Eli's fingers once and lay his head on the boy's lap. Nathan sat down, eyes locked on the dog. They didn't just train you to find drugs, did they? Maverick blinked slowly, almost in response. Rachel leaned against the far wall, arms folded tight. Why would anyone be tracking a dog? He's just a dog. Nathan looked up. Not to them. To them, he's evidence. The words landed with weight. Evidence. Of what? Of something they tried to bury. The procedure was quiet. Dr. Levesque worked with sharp, practiced hands. Maverick lay sedated, a faint tremor in his limbs the only sign he still occupied this world. Eli didn't leave the room. He stood the whole time, watching every motion, his fingers digging into his sleeves. When it was over, Dr. Levesque placed the microchip on a sterile tray. It was barely the size of a grain of rice, sleek, unmarked. Rachel stared at it like it might come to life. No serial, no data packet. Whoever made this wanted it hidden. Nathan pocketed it without asking. Before he left, he crouched next to the boy. Keep him close, Eli. Never let him out of your sight. Eli nodded. I won't. Rachel followed Nathan outside. The rain had stopped, but the clouds still hung low gray and swollen, like bruises waiting to bloom. Is this going to get worse? She asked. Nathan looked back at her with something unreadable in his face. I think the question is, why did they want him gone in the first place? The phone rang 3 times before someone picked up. Yeah? The voice on the other end was coarse, like gravel in a throat. Tired, but sharp. It's me, Nathan said, his voice low. He hadn't used this number in over 4 years. There was a pause, a breath. Then, Jesus. Reyes, I thought you were ghosted for good. I need a favor, Lou. Lieutenant Lou Carter had once been the type who never turned in his badge for a desk. Retired now, but with ears still deep in places no precinct would dare file. If something foul moved in the city's undercurrent, Lou heard the splash before anyone else smelled the blood. You calling about the dog? Nathan's heart kicked. You heard. I hear everything, Lou said. But this one's different. You sure you want to dig? There was a silence. I don't have a choice, Nathan said. He stepped outside the clinic and crossed the gravel lot, a thin line of vapor curling from his lips with each breath. In the passenger seat of his truck, the dog Maverick was sleeping off the sedative. But even in unconsciousness, his posture wasn't soft. One paw slightly raised. Ready. Nathan leaned against the driver's side door, lowering his voice. I found a second chip in him. Not PD. Buried deep. Hidden. You ever hear of anything like that? Lou sucked in a breath. Yeah. Once. 5 years back. Narcotics unit out of Phoenix had a dog disappear. A week later, he shows up at a private lab 2 states over. Chip was fried, but someone had been tracking him. They couldn't prove it, but they suspected red market interest. Red market? The kind of trade that sells trained canines like weapons, quiet deals, south border runs. You ever hear of Darius Vole? The name dropped like a stone in water. Nathan hadn't heard it in years, but it came back like a ghost that still wore a badge. I thought he went under. Yeah, undercover, beneath layers of proxy firms and fake IDs. But he's still breathing. Rumor is he's been building something. Not drugs, not guns, dogs. Nathan felt his throat go dry. Why dogs? Lou paused. Because dogs don't talk, and they don't leave witnesses. For a moment, Nathan couldn't breathe. The idea of Maverick, his Maverick used like that, turned his stomach. You're saying he might have had Maverick tagged? For what tracking? Or retrieval? Lou muttered. If Vole ever lost control of one of his assets, he'd want to know where it went. Might even want it back. Nathan leaned his forehead against the cold metal of the truck. You got anything solid? Not yet. Just whispers. A name dropped here. A van with blackout plates there? But listen, Reyes, if this dog of yours is really on his radar, you're in deeper than just old ghosts. What would he want with Maverick? Lou's voice turned quieter. What any predator wants with a weapon that never questions orders. Nathan closed his eyes. The air around him felt tighter now, like something was watching from the tree line. Silent. Waiting. You got a paper trail? Nope. Just dead ends and erased reports. But I'll dig. Thanks, Lou. Watch your back, Reyes. This isn't precinct politics. This is blacktop, off-grid kind of danger. The kind where dogs don't come back, and neither do their handlers. That night, Nathan didn't drive home. He sat in the truck outside Rachel's house, hands on the wheel, staring at the porch light. The world felt quieter than it should, like sound was holding its breath. Inside, through the thin curtains, he could see Eli asleep on the couch. Maverick lay near the boy's feet, head up, eyes alert despite the fresh stitches along his neck. Rachel appeared in the window a moment later, holding a mug, arms folded. She didn't wave. She didn't need to. He stepped out of the truck and met her halfway down the walk. I need to tell you something, Nathan said. Rachel's face was unreadable. Is it worse than what I already know? It's not better, he admitted. Inside, over cold tea, he told her everything. About Lou, about Darius Vole, about the possibility that Maverick had been marked sold, even without either of them knowing. Rachel's hands shook slightly as she set down her mug. So, you're telling me we've been living with a loaded weapon that someone wants back? No, Nathan said gently. You've been living with a soldier who chose not to follow orders anymore. She blinked. Then why is he still here? Nathan glanced toward the living room, where Maverick lay unmoving, watching the hallway. Because sometimes, Nathan said quietly, the ones who were trained to obey are the first to run when they realize the mission was wrong. Rachel swallowed, her voice cracking. And what about the people who trained them to trust again? Nathan met her eyes. They need to be protected too. The wind pressed against the clinic windows like it was trying to get in. It was past midnight, and Dr. Felton's modest veterinary practice stood alone off the main road, its lights off, its gravel lot empty except for a single car parked crooked beneath a flickering street lamp. Inside, the silence shattered. The back door splintered with a quiet thud, controlled, deliberate. No alarm sounded. The intruder moved quickly, wearing gloves and headgear, a flashlight cutting surgical swaths through the dark. Not a smash and grab. It was surgical. They didn't touch the cash drawer or meds. They didn't pause at the examination room. Instead, they walked straight toward the locked cabinet near the back office. A single keyhole. No keypad. The lock gave after 2 precise twists of a tension wrench. Inside were 3 folders. Only one was taken. The one labeled Reyes Nathan, K9 Maverick. A few miles away, in a quiet suburban home, Echo jerked awake without a sound. The German shepherd's ears twitched. Then his whole body stiffened, not with fear, but instinct. His head lifted, nose tilted slightly, catching something. A scent, a shift in the wind. Something old and dangerous coming back. Eli slept curled under a blanket shaped like a dinosaur tail, mouth open slightly, arms wrapped around a worn, stuffed animal. But before he could stir from whatever dream held him, Echo moved. With impossible gentleness, the dog placed a paw on Eli's shoulder. No bark, no growl, just pressure, just presence. Eli's eyes opened. Sleep clung to him, but he blinked slowly, then fully. Echo's face hovered inches from his, expression calm but locked in. Eli sat up. He didn't say a word. He didn't need to. The two moved as if they'd done this before. Eli padded toward the door, cracked it, looked down the hall. Everything seemed normal, but Echo stood still as stone, blocking the exit, his gaze fixed beyond the walls, like he was seeing something far away, or remembering something too close. A minute later, Rachel stirred from her room. The hallway light flicked on. She found them both standing there, Eli barefoot and confused, Echo unmoving and wide awake. "What's going on?" she whispered. Eli spoke without turning. "Something's wrong." Rachel's hand found the phone on instinct. By morning, the news spread. Break-in at Shady Pines Veterinary Clinic. Files stolen. No cash or meds taken. Authorities baffled. Nathan arrived first. His boots hit the gravel like war drums. Felton was already inside, shaking his head in disbelief as the police dusted for prints they knew they wouldn't find. "The only file missing," the vet said grimly, "was his." He didn't need to point. Nathan already knew. Maverick. Echo. The walls felt closer. The shadows under the exam table looked deeper. Nathan reached into his coat and pulled out the keychain with the metal tag Maverick's original police badge number etched into it. "He's not just marked," Nathan said quietly. "He's being hunted." Felton nodded. "And whoever broke in knew exactly what they were looking for. This wasn't random." "What did that file contain?" Rachel asked, her voice tight. "Everything," Felton said. "Original chip ID, blood work, x-rays, proof of identity. If someone wanted to rewrite his record, erase him from the system, they just did it," Nathan finished. Outside, Echo stood next to the truck. He didn't move, but his eyes never stopped scanning. Cars, sidewalks, branches moving the wrong way in the wind. He wasn't panicked. He was preparing. Rachel looked at Nathan. "They're coming, aren't they?" He didn't answer right away. He looked at Eli, who stood beside Echo Small, quiet, unblinking. Then he said, "They never stopped." That night, Rachel double-locked every door. Nathan sat at the kitchen table, Maverick's old collar laid out in front of him like a relic. It was scuffed, the brass tag dull with age, but it still carried the weight of 100 missions. He remembered a time when this dog could clear a warehouse in 12 seconds, when he could track a single scent across 5 miles of desert, when he could take down a man twice Nathan's size without drawing blood. But the thing that scared Nathan now wasn't what Echo could do. It was what someone else wanted to use him for. Rachel finally broke the silence. "What if they try to take him?" Nathan didn't blink. "They won't ask." Echo lay in the hallway, body curled but ears up, always listening. Eli slept in the next room. The wind outside picked up, and with it a strange stillness, like the world was watching again, holding its breath. Nathan said, "We need to be ready." Rachel's voice cracked. "For what?" Nathan didn't look up. He just stared at the brass tag in his hands. For whatever they trained him to forget. They discovered it by accident. It was late afternoon, sun leaking soft gold through the blinds, when Rachel pulled open the door to the basement. Just a crack, just enough to reach for an old box of winter coats. Echo froze. No growl, no bark. But his entire body stiffened, ears flat, tail locked. He didn't move, didn't blink. His eyes fixed on the dark space behind the door like it was alive. Rachel turned, confused. "Hey, it's just the—" A low whimper slipped out of him. Something primal, old, not fear of the unknown, fear of memory. Echo backed away step by step until his back hit the hallway wall. Rachel stopped moving. She closed the door gently, her hands suddenly cold. Later she tried again. Different time, different light. She placed a treat halfway down the top stair, coaxing him. "Come on, boy. Just a step." Echo sat still in the hallway, not touching the treat. Not looking at her, just the door. Like it was the beginning of something he'd fought too hard to forget. Other things followed. He snarled, not barked at the scent of a specific cologne worn by a delivery man. His lip curled like someone had touched a wire inside him. Rachel had to physically hold his harness. Another day, Eli spilled a toy doctor kit on the floor. Among the plastic thermometers and stethoscopes was a play syringe. Echo went rigid, hackles raised. He backed into the pantry and refused to come out for 10 minutes. Rachel sat on the couch that night, holding the plastic syringe in her hands like it was evidence in a trial. She didn't say the word out loud, but it was there. Torture. Conditioning. What they did to him after he vanished. Nathan didn't deny it. He didn't confirm it either. He just said quietly, "Some things don't leave the bloodstream, no matter how many times you rinse it out." And yet, there was Eli, the only one Echo never flinched from. The boy had taken to talking to him in full paragraphs now, quietly, calmly, like he was narrating his world for Echo to reassemble. One morning, Rachel found them in the backyard. Eli had stacked overturned buckets, broom handles, and couch cushions into a crude obstacle course. It looked more like chaos than strategy, but there was purpose. Echo stood at the start line, still, watching. Eli crouched beside him, pointed to a bucket with 2 fingers. Echo didn't move. Eli tried again. "Over." No force, no pressure, just suggestion. Echo tilted his head. Then, cautiously, he stepped forward. 1 paw, then 2. He vaulted the bucket, clipped the broom handle, slipped slightly on the grass, but didn't stop. Rachel watched from the kitchen window, heart in her throat. The sun hit his coat just right, and for a moment she saw it. The posture of a dog in motion, not broken, not fearful, just rusty. He completed the run, reached Eli, sat. The boy grinned and gave him a piece of apple from his pocket. Echo didn't even sniff it. He just took it, gently. Rachel opened the screen door. Eli turned. "He likes it." "He likes you," she said softly. Echo walked past her, calmer than he had been in days, and curled up beside the porch. Eli stayed out there with him for an hour. No words, just company. That night, Rachel sat beside Nathan at the kitchen table. He was scanning a faded blueprint of a canine training compound military, unauthorized, now shut down. She slid the plastic syringe across the table. He won't go near basements, or certain men, or that. Nathan didn't touch the syringe. Smells like chlorhexidine, same chemical used before injection at trauma sites. Sometimes they inject adrenaline afterward to keep them responsive during testing. Rachel's jaw clenched. Testing? He met her eyes. You don't want the details. But she already knew. Because her son, this boy with too many hospital wristbands and a quiet heart, had never once needed to say a word to reach Echo. And that kind of trust? It only exists when two survivors find each other. Rachel looked out the window. Echo slept with one paw hanging off the porch step, tail twitching gently. Eli's blanket was tucked beside him. She whispered, "He's trying." Nathan replied, "Then we owe him the same." The folder hit the table with a soft thump, not loud enough to wake Eli upstairs, but it startled Rachel. She looked up from her tea, eyes drawn to the frayed edges of manila paper and the names written in faded ink. "Dogs?" she asked, seeing the labeled tabs. "These are—" Nathan didn't answer right away. He pulled out a chair and sat with the weight of someone who hadn't slept properly in years. His fingers traced a photo clipped to the front file. It was grainy, surveillance quality. But even in black and white, the German Shepherd in the picture was unmistakable. Muzzle low, eyes locked. That stance only years of training and trauma could forge. "Maverick," he said, "but not when he was mine." Rachel reached across the table, hesitating. "Where did you get this?" "Back channel. Retired canine handler in Arizona. Been tracking rumors for years. Disappearances, quiet ones. Dogs that never made it back to the precinct. Dogs like mine." He pushed the next photo forward. A Labrador too lean, eyes too dull led across a tarmac by a man in civilian clothing. Another of a Doberman sniffing crates in a warehouse without markings. No insignia. No handlers in uniform. They called it a rotation program. Said some dogs were reassigned to private contractors. "Only it wasn't law enforcement." Rachel's voice was thin. "Then what was it?" Nathan exhaled through his nose. He tapped a name on the bottom of one of the reports. VOHL. Darius. A face came with it. Late 40s. Polished. The type of man who wore silence like armor. Not criminal on paper cleaner than a whistle. But in the field, he was a ghost. Slipped through jurisdictions. Showed up wherever high-value drug corridors were exposed. Left nothing but rumors in his wake. He was building something, Nathan said. An empire, not of people, of dogs. Rachel blinked. Dogs? Think about it. Who gets waved through customs faster than a trained K9? Who knows how to locate hidden stashes better than them? Vole figured it out, trained them once for the right reasons, then reprogram. He opened a side folder. It contained a series of schematic drawings, modified muzzle rigs, scent cartridges, even notes on adrenal stimulation through microcurrent pulses. Rachel paled. He turned them into couriers. And sensors, scanners, sniffers. No questions asked, no reports filed. No one suspects a German Shepherd with a badge or a replica of one. She couldn't look away from the sketches. A hollowed-out vest. A rig attached to the inside of a dog's mouth, designed to trigger when a specific scent hit their nasal receptors. Her hands trembled. That's why Maverick reacts to syringes and dark spaces and that cologne. Nathan nodded. They sedated them, conditioned them, used scent markers and fear training to hardwire reactions, then deployed them like tools. And he escaped. Nathan smiled, but it was a smile that held no warmth. Oh, Maverick didn't just escape. He broke their system. First, successful prototype, and also their biggest failure. Whatever they tried to do, it didn't erase the cop in him. The partner. He remembered who he was. Rachel felt her throat tighten. She remembered Echo, the way he sat by Eli's bed before nightmares even began, the way he leaned into touch, but only from her son, how he flinched at orders but responded to gentleness. But if Vole lost him, she said slowly, why not move on? Why try to take him back? Nathan opened the final page. A map, red dots across 5 states, distribution points, shelters, airports, abandoned training sites, and at the center, a city with no label, just coordinates. Because Maverick's not just proof of concept, he's evidence. Somewhere inside him is everything they did, every location, every scent signature, maybe even tracking data they embedded without knowing he'd survive it. Rachel closed her eyes. They weren't just protecting a dog. They were hiding the key to unraveling an empire. Nathan looked toward the stairs, toward the soft creak of a child turning in bed. He wasn't just trying to get home, he said. He was running from something. But now that he's stopped, they'll come. Rachel looked down at the photo again. The dog in the picture Echo, Maverick, whatever name he bore, wasn't posing. He was watching the camera, like he knew. It was just another walk. A quiet Tuesday. Late morning sun filtered through thinning clouds, casting a soft light over the neighborhood sidewalks. Echo padded beside Eli with the familiar rhythm of someone who had learned, finally, to relax. One ear flicked at passing traffic. The other twitched every time Eli spoke, quiet. Silly things only dogs and children understood. Nathan walked a few paces behind with Rachel, hands in his jacket pockets, still chewing over maps and names that hadn't left his mind since Vole's file hit their kitchen table. They had just passed the post office when Echo stopped. Not a pause, a halt, muscles locked, head low, shoulders tense. Eli noticed too, his small hand still loosely gripping Echo's leash. "What is it, boy?" Then Echo growled, low and guttural, too deep for a normal trigger. His body trembled, legs bracing like a coiled spring. Then he snapped forward, leash slipping free of Eli's grip. Before anyone could speak, Echo bolted across the street. "Echo!" Nathan shouted, lunging after him, but the dog was already airborne. Across the road, a man in a gray hoodie had just exited a corner deli, earbuds in, head down. He looked up too late. Echo collided with his chest mid-step, knocking him off the curb and onto the pavement. But he didn't bite, didn't snarl. Instead, Echo stood over him, unmoving. His nose pressed close to the man's neck, then his chest, sniffing, cataloging, verifying. His tail didn't wag. His breathing was ragged. Every muscle locked. Rachel grabbed Eli and pulled him close as Nathan sprinted to the scene. The man on the ground raised his hands, panicked. "What the hell is this? Get your dog off me!" But Nathan had already frozen. He knew that face. Older, scruffier, lighter hair now and too many lines around the eyes. But it was him, Dale Renner. Handler ID 9275. Discharged quietly after an accidental overdose during a mission out of state. Except Nathan knew the real story. Renner didn't just vanish from the force. He switched sides. Vol's side. Echo still hadn't moved. Nathan crouched beside him slowly, voice low. "Echo, stand down." Echo didn't budge. His eyes never left Renner's. Rachel approached cautiously with Eli, her hand on the boy's shoulder. "You know him?" she asked. Nathan nodded. "Used to be a handler, worked K9s, but something changed. He started pushing the dogs too hard, too far. He disappeared after an investigation got too close." Echo finally stepped back, slowly, reluctantly, as if his instincts told him to stay, but his training said enough. Renner pulled himself up, dusted off, sneered. "You got a real psychopath on your hands, old man." "You don't get to talk about him," Nathan said, his voice low and cold. The tension was palpable, so thick it pushed back against the air. Rachel felt Eli shiver beside her, and she realized Echo hadn't forgotten this man. Not even a little. "Why'd he go for you?" she asked, sharp. Renner scoffed. "Hell if I know." But his eyes flicked, just briefly, to the inside of his coat. And Nathan saw it. A faint bulge, slim, rectangular, metal casing, a remote stimulator used in scent recall training. Illegal now. Torturous, always. Vol's men had used them to reactivate responses in dogs long after memory was supposed to fade. Nathan stepped closer. "Still carrying your tricks, huh? Thought you were done with all that." Renner took a step back. "I'm just here for groceries." But Echo growled again. A warning. Nathan's voice dropped. "You followed us. You were close enough to trigger a response. You wore something used, something that pulled a thread from his past. And you thought he wouldn't remember." For a second, the street was silent except for the sound of Echo's breathing. Heavy, controlled, but still on edge. Then Rachel spoke, quiet but firm. "He's not just remembering. He's choosing." Renner turned, mumbled something about lawyers, and disappeared down the street, walking faster now, shrinking into the crowd. Nathan crouched and placed a hand on Echo's shoulder. "You did good, partner." Echo looked up at him. Not panting, not wagging, but steady, present. It wasn't rage that had driven him. It was precision. Rachel knelt beside them. He remembered him. "Not just that," Nathan said. "He recognized what he used to be, and he still chose restraint." Eli stood a few steps back, watching it all. His voice was soft when he spoke. "Did Echo stop a bad guy?" Nathan nodded slowly. "Yeah, buddy, he did." Echo returned to Eli's side without a command. The boy reached down and hugged him around the neck. Echo let out a breath, almost a sigh, and leaned in. Rachel stood, her voice tight. "If they're here, they're close." Nathan didn't reply. He was already pulling out his phone. Some memories sleep, others wait in silence. But Echo's had just awakened, and so had the enemy's shadow. The storm didn't roll in. It snuck no sirens, no alerts. Just a creeping wind curling around windows like fingers testing locks. By midnight, the sky was a bruise. Inside the house, Echo hadn't laid down once. He paced, alert, circling like a soldier on patrol. Rachel noticed first. Robe-clad, she watched him stiffen near the back door. A low growl rumbled, not fear, readiness. "Echo," she whispered. He didn't look back. Then a sound from upstairs. Feet on carpet. Eli. His voice trembled. "Mom?" A red streak of blood traced from his nose. Rachel knelt. "You're okay." Echo stepped in gently. Then, with one deliberate motion, licked the blood from Eli's lip and turned, ears up, facing the door again. A click outside. Mechanical. Rachel's heart hammered. She moved Eli to the hallway, opened a locked panel, and pulled out her father's old pistol. Echo stood guard. When Eli asked why Echo wouldn't sleep, she replied, "Because he knows something's wrong." Outside, wind howled. Inside, silence pressed down like a weight. She made a nest in the living room. Eli curled into it, clutching Echo's leash. But Echo didn't sleep. He stayed at the door, unmoving, watching. And when Eli shifted in sleep, Echo moved to him, placed a paw on his side, anchoring him. Neither Rachel nor Echo slept that night. The next day, the silence was too complete. Then click. Rachel froze mid-dish. Echo leapt up. Then a crash. Back of the house. Laundry room window. A masked man burst in, precise, methodical, not a burglar. Echo struck him mid-charge, slamming him into the washer. The man drew a knife. Rachel called 911. Behind her, a thud, then a whine. Echo staggered back, bleeding from the shoulder. But he didn't retreat. He crouched, snarling, still guarding. The man advanced, then a scream. "No!" Eli, halfway down the stairs. Echo threw himself between the knife and the boy. Rachel grabbed the fireplace poker and swung hard. The intruder reeled. Echo lunged again, biting, pinning. The house filled with chaos. Sirens, shouts. Rachel pulled Eli into the corner. "Don't look." But he did. Blood on tile, Echo trembling but still standing. The police burst in. The man surrendered. One officer knelt by Echo. "Jesus, he took a blade for them." Emergency vet called. Rachel collapsed beside Echo, hand on his cheek. "You stayed," she whispered. Echo didn't move, just blinked, still watching Eli. The boy crawled forward, lay beside him. "I'm here too." Only then did Echo close his eyes. Clinic lights flickered red and blue from outside. Rachel sat in the corner, hands still stained. Eli sat beside her, hoodie over his knees. Silent, pale, not crying, just waiting. The vet had said the knife missed Echo's lung by half an inch. Had it gone deeper? Rachel didn't let him finish. Then the bell above the door chimed. Nathan stepped in, coat half-zipped, shotgun slung across his shoulder. "I came straight from the cabin," he said. From under his coat, he pulled a leather folder. One word on the cover, "Carrick." Rachel blinked. "What is that?" "The part I should have told you long ago." Eli's voice broke the quiet. "Is Echo gonna be okay?" Nathan knelt. "He's fighting, and he's got a reason to." Rachel whispered, "They came for Maverick's files. It wasn't random. They were after him." Nathan nodded. Carrick wasn't just a facility, it was a training hub. Not for cops, for mercenaries. Vole was programming dogs. Echo wasn't an escape. He was the first to run. And they've been hunting him ever since. Eli stood up. "But he's ours now." Rachel put an arm around him. "And we'll protect him, like he protected us." Nathan set the photo face down. "I'm staying. Inside." Rachel agreed. "Because I don't think this is the last time they'll come." Eli leaned into her quiet, but not broken. Then a soft whine echoed from the back hallway. "Mom," Eli whispered. "He's awake." They walked together, down the corridor, past the walls that had seen too much. Inside, Echo lay on a padded mat, IV in his leg, eyes half open. When he saw them, his tail thumped just once. Eli walked straight to him, curled up beside the dog who nearly died for him, and whispered something only Echo could hear. Rachel stood by the door, watching the boy and the dog, one wounded, the other silent. But in that moment, neither looked broken, just whole. The wind had eased since dawn, but the sky still hung heavy over the abandoned service road where Nathan parked. He stared at the manila envelope on the seat beside him, unopened since the night Echo bled out in Rachel's arms. Carrick. Not just a name anymore, a fracture line. He stepped into the decommissioned precinct, the one that still housed what people tried to forget. In the archive room, Captain Ron Mallory, retired, not clean but not rotten, was waiting. "You asked about Carrick," Mallory said. "We were told to forget him." Nathan dropped the envelope on the table. "Then tell me what I wasn't supposed to know." Mallory unfolded Carrick's personnel file. A K-9 supervisor with medals, respect, and full access. 7 dogs, he muttered. Marked as operational losses, no exit logs, no handler updates, they just disappeared. Maverick was one of them, Nathan said. So were Bravo, Kuno, Ajax, Mallory nodded. All elite. Then gone. No paperwork. Carrick signed off on it. Where'd they go? You know where. Mallory's eyes darkened. They weren't decommissioned, Nathan whispered. They were sold. To Vole, Mallory confirmed. Prototypes. Not for killing, for identification, for targeting. Maverick broke the pattern. That's why he was buried. Nathan took the files. You're not safe either. I know, Mallory said. Do it fast, before Carrick knows you're digging. Nathan left without a word. Outside the sun cut through the fog, and now he had a name. At the clinic, Echo slept under a fleece blanket. His shoulder was bandaged. Eli hadn't left his side. He didn't leave me. I'm not leaving him, he told the nurses. Rachel stepped away to call Nathan. Alone, Eli wandered into the back closet and found it. A box marked, Maverick, Old Records, Personal. Inside, laminated training sheets, a faded photo of a floppy-eared puppy, and a collar, thick black leather. On the inside, hand-carved, until my last breath. Eli didn't cry. He slid it over his wrist like a cuff, then returned to Echo and whispered, You're not sleeping alone again. Ever. Echo stirred, sniffed the collar, and placed a paw over the boy's hand. When Rachel found them, she just pulled a blanket over both and knelt beside them. They didn't need words. They were healing in rhythm 2 survivors who decided to be whole together. 3 days later, under a rain-slick overpass, Nathan passed a sealed folder to Maya Chen, a journalist who still used notepads and made enemies in the right places. You didn't get this from me, he said. Inside, forged reports, Carrick's file, and transfer records tied to Vole. She didn't speak. She didn't need to. He turned and vanished into the alley. Then came the article. Dogs in the Dark. How Forgotten K-9s Were Fed into a Black Market Pipeline, by Maya Chen. It traced 7 years of quiet K-9 removals written off as unfit, reappearing in black ops and narcotics raids abroad. Carrick was named, so was Vole. But it was the photos that set it off. One of Maverick chained, collar intact. A log stamped behavioral instability. Scribbled underneath, still responds to scent commands. Potential use. Stash detection. By afternoon, the city buzzed. By sundown, they gathered. It began with a woman outside the precinct, holding a leash with no dog, only a photo clipped to the collar. Then 2 ex-handlers. Then dozens. Signs rose. Justice for the forgotten K9s. Not tools, not trash. Partners. Carrick knew. Where's Bravo 9? Ask Vole. Rachel stood at the edge of the crowd, Eli tucked beneath her coat, collar still on his wrist. Echo was beside them, limping but upright. He didn't bark, just watched the precinct windows with the memory of 1,000 tracks. News vans rolled in. Maya gave a shadowed interview. Nathan stayed hidden on a rooftop, binoculars in hand, watching. He spotted a retired officer, a handler, a councilman's wife with a sign, "He saved my son." And for the first time in years, Nathan felt something stir. Accountability, not in court, but in the people, in their eyes, in their memory. That night, someone slid wildflowers through the K9 memorial fence. Tied to it, a water-wrinkled paper, written in a child's hand. He didn't forget me. Echo lay under the porch as storm clouds rolled in. He didn't pace. He listened. And for once, he knew the world was listening back. Windfall Ridge had always been a place people forgot. Tucked deep between snow-laced hills and pine forests, it held nothing but silence. An abandoned ranger outpost, a few cabins, and broken logging roads. No signal, no neighbors, just memory. Rachel hadn't returned since her father died. But when the second unmarked car appeared outside the clinic at dawn, engine running, windows dark, she knew it was time. They drove north for hours. Eli curled in the back seat, clutching Echo's paw like a lifeline. The dog stayed motionless, eyes following the trees. The storm trailed them like a breath. By dusk, the cabin stood weathered but upright. Rachel pushed open the door. No key, just memory. Dust hung in the air. "It's not much," she said, "but it's safe." Eli didn't reply. He'd already found the dent in the floor, the fireplace, and a photo of Rachel holding a dog with one floppy ear. Quietly, he turned the frame face down. Snow blanketed everything by morning. Rachel scavenged rations from the shed, coaxed the wood stove back to life, splinters stinging her hands. Victory came with the first curl of warmth. Eli built a snow fort near the clearing 3 walls, a trench, a pine branch roof. He moved with quiet precision. Echo watched from 10 feet away, unmoving, guarding. When Eli planted a stick as a flag, Echo approached, sniffed, and lay down at its front. A silent sentinel. Rachel watched from the porch, coffee warming her hands. For the first time in weeks, her chest didn't ache. Eli was playing, Echo was healing, and no one knew where they were. That night, Eli slept with his cheek against Echo's ribs. Rachel flipped through her father's old notebook, sketches of wolf tracks, ranger names, and a line she didn't remember writing. "Wolves don't run from the storm. They face it, together." Around midnight, Echo stirred. He padded to the door, ears taut. Rachel whispered, "You smell something?" He didn't move. After a moment, he lay back down. But the forest remembered. The next night, snow fell heavier. Rachel woke to cold creeping past the firelight. Echo's blanket was empty. Then came the growl deep outside. Rachel grabbed a flashlight, boots half-laced. The cold bit hard. Echo stood at the tree line, rigid. Then a faint hum. A drone, not recreational. Infrared. Circling. Rachel backed toward the cabin. But Echo ran, silent. She followed, breath short. Out of the trees came a man, black jacket, masked, suppressor in hand. No words. He aimed. She dove. A shot hissed past. Echo struck like lightning, tackling the man. Rachel grabbed the gun. The attacker kicked Echo off and lunged. "Mom!" Eli's voice cracked the air barefoot, arms wide. The man turned. Rachel fired, missed. But then, headlights. A truck barreled through the trees. A shotgun muzzle swung down. "Down!" Nathan's voice barked. The masked man froze. Then bolted. Echo gave chase, vanishing into the trees. Nathan jumped out, gun raised. "He had a suppressor," Rachel gasped. "He was aiming for me." Nathan swore, handed her cloth. "Infrared drone, that means more. Get Eli, get the dog, now." Inside, Eli shook in her arms. "I knew he wasn't good." A beat later, Echo limped through the door, blood on his snout. Rachel didn't need to ask. They hadn't come alone. Nathan loaded them into the truck. Echo jumped into the bed. Eli curled in Rachel's lap under a blanket. They disappeared into the woods, chains clanking. Behind them, a second drone circled the cabin, beeped once, and vanished. The hunt had begun. But Echo had drawn first blood. At dawn, Rachel stood at the overlook, snow-coated Windfall Ridge. Echo lay nearby, sore but breathing. Inside, Eli slept beside the fire, Echo's old collar wrapped around his wrist. Nathan stood behind her, arms crossed, a file marked Carrick in his coat pocket. "I can't run anymore," Rachel said, not turning. "I thought hiding would be enough, but Carrick, Vole, they don't stop. They erase. They bury dogs like Echo and call it paperwork." She turned to face him. "I'm done being silent." Nathan's jaw clenched. "Then you know what comes next." "I do, and I'm ready." She walked inside, picked up her cracked phone, found the number she'd sworn never to call again. Melissa Tran, a journalist, a whisper chaser. Rachel hit call. "Hello?" came the tired voice. "It's Rachel Hale," she said. "You asked if I'd ever go on record." Pause. "Yes?" "Get your recorder ready. I'm about to give you everything." 20 minutes later, Rachel sat on the couch. Nathan stood nearby. Eli still slept. Echo guarded the door. She spoke. She told Melissa about Maverick, the lie that he bit a child when in truth he'd alerted on narcotics. A test. A punishment. She told her about Carrick, the falsified records, the dogs marked unfit and vanished. 7 of them. She told her about the drone, the masked man, the shot that almost took her, and the dog who stood in the way. Melissa said nothing, but the typing never stopped. "You understand what this means?" she finally asked. "Once this is public, you're a target." "I already am," Rachel said softly. "At least now I'm aiming back." That night, Nathan sat on the porch. Carrick's file open. The hearing was in 5 days. City Hall. Oversight Committee. His name was no longer anonymous. Rachel joined him, offering a hot drink. "Carrick won't go quietly," she said. "I'm not asking him to." Silence stretched between them. Then Rachel asked, "Why now?" Nathan didn't look at her, just stared at the trees. "Because you stood up. Because Echo bled for your boy. Because Eli's the only one not afraid." "Do you think we'll make it?" she whispered. Nathan looked at her. I think we already did. Inside, Echo slept. One paw twitched. Eli had placed the collar above the hearth like a promise. And on that porch, two people once broken by silence finally chose to speak. The town hall had never been so silent. Even the air felt heavy, as if the rafters themselves were holding their breath. Reporters lined the walls, cameras blinking red. Veterans sat with old pins and older wounds. At the front, under the lights, two chairs. Rachel sat in one, Nathan in the other. And at their feet, Echo, not in a vest but a dark collar with a silver badge clipped at his neck. Eli stood nearby, fists tight in his jacket, eyes fixed on Carrick. Councilwoman Reyes cleared her throat. Mr. Keller, Ms. Hale, you've requested to present sworn testimony regarding the alleged disappearance and unauthorized redistribution of trained K-9s. This hearing is being recorded. Proceed. Nathan didn't bring notes. I served 15 years as a K-9 handler. I trained dogs to find bombs, bodies, children. I watched them die in my arms. I buried one who took a bullet for me. Pause. What I didn't know until recently was that some of the best were being sold. Gasps. He laid down a photo Maverick licking a boy's cheek. Dated 2017. They said he bit a civilian, but he passed every test. Then he vanished. Rachel continued. Maverick was our partner. When he didn't come home, we got paperwork, lies, until we found him again, dumped, rebranded, barely alive. But he remembered. He remembered my son. Then the voice that had haunted them. This is absurd. Lieutenant Carrick stood, clean-cut, polished. That dog is a mutt with a scarred psyche. Eli flinched. Nathan rose. Let me show you something. He tapped a remote. A screen flickered. Septa 3, 2020, 02:11 a.m. Carrick on security footage, talking to a man in a dark suit. A K-9 alert, harnessed being loaded into a van with no plates. Carrick's voice. He's got a strong nose, quiet, obedient. Payments in full. No paperwork, no trail. The room erupted. Eli stepped forward. He unclipped Echo's badge and placed it in front of the council. Reyes blinked. What's this, sweetheart? For the ones who didn't make it, Eli said. He turned and hugged Echo tightly. Even Carrick had nothing left to say. The hearing ended, but the cold outside felt like unfinished business. Rachel gripped Eli's hand tighter as they exited through the rear. The back lot was empty. Too empty. Echo's ears twitched. His breath steamed, every muscle tense. Rachel had gone ahead to get the car. Just 2 minutes. Then a sound. Metallic. Left side. Echo growled. Get behind me, she whispered. 3 men stepped from behind the dumpster. One had a taser. Another scarred, familiar spoke. Rachel Hale? Walk away, she said. Can't. Orders. They moved. One lunged for Eli. Echo launched through the car window. Glass shattered. Blood in the air. Teeth clamped onto the attacker's wrist mid-lunge. Eli screamed. Rachel screamed one word. Echo! A taser fired. The darts hit. Echo seized, then collapsed. No! Eli cried. Rachel pushed him behind the car. The third man raised a gun. Then, bang! Nathan's truck skidded in, a warning shot. Drop it, he ordered. Now! Weapons clattered to pavement. The scarred man locked eyes with Nathan. You just bought time. They disappeared into the dark. Rachel dropped to Echo's side. His fur was scorched. One paw twitched. "You stayed," she whispered. Eli clutched his muzzle. "I won't let them take you." Nathan stood guard, rifle in hand, saying nothing, saying everything. Red and blue lights flashed across the snow. Ash still floated in the air from the fire Carrick had started, trying to erase his tracks. Too late. Echo lay in the back seat of Nathan's truck, wrapped in Eli's jacket, breathing shallow, burned and wounded. Rachel pressed gauze to his shoulder, her hands steady, her eyes not. "He needs a vet. Now." "I called ahead," Nathan replied. "They're waiting." But Eli wouldn't move. He curled beside Echo, whispering, "You're not going back into the dark." "Not again. Not like before." Echo whimpered softly. Tail thumped once. Across the lot, 2 officers dragged Carrick through the slush in cuffs. No yelling, no begging, just cold glares. "Lieutenant Marcus Carrick," one officer announced. "You are under arrest for conspiracy, evidence tampering, and abuse under the Canine Regulation Act." Flashbulbs popped, questions flew, but Eli didn't hear any of it. Only Echo's breath. Nathan opened the passenger door. "We've got 20 minutes before the road ices." Rachel reached for Eli's shoulder. "Sweetheart, come up front. Echo needs space." Eli shook his head. "No." "Eli, I'm not leaving him." A quiet fire in his voice. Certain, solid. "I choose him." Nathan knelt, meeting the boy's eyes. "We're not asking you to leave. We're asking you to help him breathe. Ride in back. Stay close. Talk to him. Don't let him drift." Eli paused, then nodded. They moved fast, lifting Echo into the truck, wrapping him in coats and blankets. Eli crawled in beside him, arms around his ribs like a heartbeat. "You hold on to him," Nathan said, closing the tailgate, "and he'll hold on to you." The truck roared into the snow-dark night. Behind them, smoke rose. The story of the forgotten canines was no longer buried. In the back seat, Eli whispered again, "You're not going back into the dark." Echo didn't speak, but he didn't let go either. The sky over Fairhaven was the color of steel, quiet and vast. Rows of chairs stretched across the city square, filled with neighbors, officers, and strangers drawn by headlines. At the front stood a podium beneath a banner, "Service, Sacrifice, Second Chances." Eli sat in the front row, back straight, tie crooked, hand resting on thick fur beside him. Echo sat still. A brace wrapped his hind leg. No muzzle, no vest. Just a badge pinned that morning by trembling fingers. His amber eyes scanned the crowd, not with fear, but memory. Major Caldwell stepped to the microphone, folded his speech, and spoke simply. "Most of our medals are given in silence, to canines who never made it home. But today we give one because one dog didn't back down." He knelt before Echo, placing a silver medallion at his chest. "Echo, you are hereby awarded the Medal of Valor for service beyond expectation and courage without hesitation." The crowd stood. Silence. Then a single thump of Echo's tail. Eli rose to accept a plaque. "Junior Advocate for Forgotten Canines." He stepped to the mic, small hands trembling, until Rachel rose behind him, grounding him with one hand. "He's not just a dog, he's the one who knew," Eli said. "When I was scared, he stood between me and the dark. They said he was too broken. But he came back for me." Silence. Then applause rising and true. Caldwell returned to the mic. "Rachel Morgan, would you join us?" She stepped forward, voice steady. "Echo saved us, before we even knew we were in danger. Some heroes wear badges. Some wear scars. Some wear both." A banner unfurled, a dog's silhouette beside a child's hand. Project Echo, restoring trust, rewriting futures. From the crowd, Nathan watched, no uniform, no press pass. Just a man who once walked into darkness with a file marked Carrick and came out with something better: hope. Eli looked at the badge on his shirt, then the one Echo wore, and for the first time he smiled, not because fear was gone, but because he wasn't alone anymore. The sign wasn't fancy, just cedar, hand-carved, silent heroes' sanctuary, where the wounded heal together. Beyond the gate, kennels lined the hillside. Not cages, each had a bed, a blanket, and a view of the lavender field. Nathan stood with Rachel as the first van arrived. 6 retired dogs stepped onto new ground. One paused, then followed a whistle toward the open field. Near the trees, a girl named Ava sat with a stuffed bear. She hadn't spoken since the fire. No therapy worked. Until Dusty, a gray-muzzled K9, laid his head in her lap. She didn't flinch. She whispered, "You're not scary. You're like me." Rachel watched from the porch, clipboard in hand. Maybe it was hope or memory. Inside, Eli sat cross-legged, reading aloud from The Velveteen Rabbit. Echo lay nearby, calm. 3 other children listened quietly, each with a dog beside them. Rachel met Eli's eyes as he looked up and smiled. 6 months ago, she had been surviving. Now she was building something. Nathan stepped in. "Fencing's up," he said. "You should see Maverick. Let a kid pet him today." Outside Maverick, the last of Carrick's 7 lost K9s rested under a tree, while a boy traced the engraving on his collar, "Until my last breath." Nathan pulled a newspaper from his coat. On the front, Echo and Eli. The headline, "Justice Earned, but What Comes Next?" He asked Rachel, "You ever wonder what if we hadn't gone after them?" She walked to the corkboard where letters from parents and veterans were pinned, each ending. "You gave them someone who understood." She turned. "Every day. But maybe that doesn't matter anymore. Now we're doing something with it." Nathan nodded. "Sanctuary," he said. "Not just for dogs." Rachel glanced toward the living room. Ava was coloring. Echo rested his chin on her foot. "Not just for kids either," she added. "You built a home here too, Nathan." He scoffed. "Let's hope they never find out I still set off the smoke alarm making cookies." Rachel laughed, honest and deep. That night, Eli tiptoed outside in his pajamas. Echo followed. They sat under stars, shoulder to fur. Eli whispered something only Echo heard. For the first time, the boy didn't flinch at the dark. The wind swept across the pasture, carrying pine, lavender, and something older peace. Rachel stood at the path, clipboard in hand, but her eyes were on the boy. He was maybe 7, pale, a fading bruise on one eye, shoes too big, sleeves covering his hands. He hadn't spoken, hadn't cried, just stood by the dog enclosure, stiff. Rachel didn't approach. Some walls need time, not pressure. Then a soft thump. Echo. Old, slower now, but eyes clear as ever. He crossed the gravel, sat in front of the boy, and gently placed a paw on his knee. The boy looked up exhausted, ancient for his age. Something cracked. Not loudly, just like morning thaw. A breath escaped. Then a smile. Fragile. New. Echo pressed his head into the boy's chest. No words were spoken. None were needed. Nearby, Eli stood beside a stone memorial, 37 names etched beneath a statue of a shepherd, forgotten no more, and again that same phrase, until my last breath. Eli stared long, taller now, steadier. He turned to the boy and Echo. Off-screen, his voice narrated gentle, full of memory. Some echoes fade. The boy laid his hand on Echo's back. Some stay. Their foreheads touched. And some become the voice we didn't know we needed. The screen lingered, children played, dogs lounged. A young shepherd watched Echo, mimicking his calm. Rachel joined Eli at the edge of the field, handed him an envelope. "It's from D.C.," she said. He opened it. A formal letter, signed by a senator. "In recognition of your courage and compassion, Silent Heroes Sanctuary is now a nationally supported pilot program for the rehabilitation of service dogs and trauma-affected children." Eli looked up. Rachel's eyes welled. "They listened," she whispered. He nodded. Because he never gave up. The camera pulled back field, forest, training paths, porch light flickering on. And in the center of it all, a boy, a dog, and a future rewritten in a silence that no longer needed to scream. In a world that often forgets the silent heroes, this story is a reminder that loyalty doesn't need a language, and healing sometimes comes on 4 legs. Through Echo's unwavering presence and Eli's quiet courage, we are shown the unspoken power of love, trust, and second chances. German shepherds, with their noble hearts and fierce devotion, embody not just protection, but connection. They teach us to listen without needing words, to stand guard for those who cannot defend themselves, and to stay even when it's easier to walk away. This is more than a story about a dog and a boy. It's a story about what it means to matter, to be seen, valued, and remembered. It celebrates those who refuse to turn a blind eye, who choose kindness over silence, and who fight for the forgotten, whether human or canine. Let it inspire us to cherish the animals who walk beside us and to build a world where every echo finds a voice and every wounded soul a sanctuary. Because sometimes the bravest hearts wear fur, and sometimes they save us before we even know we need saving.